Well, for more on the UN General Assembly, I'm joined now by Lincoln Mitchell. Lincoln is an adjunct associate professor of political science at Columbia University. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So lots to unpack here today, but I want to first start with your reaction to President Xi's speech and the overall tone and the message.
Well, I think Xi's speech, he did a couple of things. One thing that kind of got everyone's attention, which was what he pledged to not build any more coal plants in foreign countries, which is a huge deal because it's a real step on climate change, which the world wants, and the world wants from powerful countries like China and like the U.S. I thought some of his language around the U.S. and that complex bilateral relationship was interesting. He and Biden were kind of mirror images of each other. They kind of both said, you know, I don't want conflict here, but we're not going to back down from our positions. She made, I thought, this odd statement about no one country has a monopoly on democracy, which I think that's a sentiment with which Joe Biden would agree entirely. It has never been the U.S. position that one country has a monopoly on democracy. It is the U.S. position, rightly or wrongly, that one country, the U.S., has the right to do things in foreign policy that other countries don't. And that is, I think, what she was pushing back at. And the U.S. is going to have to process that. She was making a very strong statement. He's done this in the past. This is where China is, and we're a power now, and we're not going to play by the rules that Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Barack Obama or George Bush or the United States wants us to play by.
And climate change is one of those areas that both countries do agree on. Obviously, we know that putting out COVID-19 is also another. We did see that COVID-19 was another focus in President Xi's speech, including his goal of providing 2 billion vaccine doses to the world by the end of the year. What message do you think this sends about the importance of really getting this pandemic under control in terms of global consequences?
Well, one of the subtext of these speeches today was that China and the U.S. seem much more able to work, maybe not together, but maybe in parallel, to end this pandemic than was the case a year ago. So that is a real difference in the American administration. And both China and the U.S. as individual countries have a real incentive to be on the forefront of doing this. 2 billion vaccines, a lot of vaccines, that is soft power. If the shot in your arm, literally, that keeps you safe from COVID comes from China, that is going to change how you as an individual, regardless of where you are in the world, think about China. And similarly, if it comes from the U.S., it's going to change how you think about the U.S. So somehow, it's kind of this benevolent race to see who can do the most. And it is important, I think Xi made this clear that he understands this, Biden clearly understands this, that both countries benefit both as the world economy gets back to normal, the wealthiest countries benefit the most when the world economy gets back to normal, but also we can build up our soft power, our relationships around the world by helping get the vaccines to other countries that may not have the resources to have them for themselves.
And of course, we did also hear from U.S. President Biden this morning, his first appearance since becoming president. Talk about how this UNGA speech has really been received.
How the President Biden speech has been received?
Yes.
Well, one thing that strikes me is that this message that America is back, which was a subtext of Biden's speech today, it's a subtext of his other speeches. But you know, this is what the first year of a Democratic presidency is always about. And if you're gone every few years, then it doesn't matter if you're back or not. And America has to get beyond that. It has to get beyond, we're back, we're the leader again, because I don't think there's much of an appetite around the world to hear that, even from our allies who want to work with us, but understand, not for any fault of Joe Biden's, that the United States is an erratic partner, which is something that you could not have said throughout the 20th century. 20th century, America was an ally. You knew where it stood. You knew that the foreign policy was going to be largely the same. But we really saw a departure from the consensus foreign policy during the Trump years. And it's very hard to rebuild that because every country, whether an ally of the United States or not, understands that a few twists in the election next time, the ball bounces a different way, a few ways, and we're back to maybe not Donald Trump, but somebody very like him, and then America's gone again.
And to that point, we did see UN Secretary General Guterres urging dialogue between the U.S. and China. As the world's two biggest economies, how much will China's relationship with the U.S. impact the UN's ability to see progress on its agenda?
There's no question that this bilateral relationship, on the one hand, we should recognize there are some real differences. The U.S. and China have very different views on where China's sphere of influence begins and ends and where the United States' sphere of influence begins and ends. Very different views on what the domestic politics of particular countries should be. They have very different views of each other's foreign policy. However, smart people in both countries, and I would put both presidents in this category, understand that we can't go to war with each other. The problem, at least on the United States side, is that there are those who are out of power and when they're in power aren't serious about governing, who are kind of pounding the drum for war because it helps them with their domestic politics. But a China-U.S. war, in my view, is just too horrific to even think about, not just for the two countries involved, because it would be terrible, but for climate change. For any global cause, and let's just talk about COVID and climate change, there needs to be a modicum of cooperation between these two countries. And I would put global prosperity and development in there as well. So these two countries have to find a way to work out and have to find a way to figure out the points on which we're going to agree, the points on which we may not agree, and to ratchet down some of that tension. And that has to come from both sides.
We do appreciate your insights. Lincoln Mitchell there, Adjunct Associate Professor of Political Science at Columbia University. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.